Hi everyone, it's Tammy with Shabby Fabrics. I am back with the On Wander Lane wall hanging. This is Sunflower Slope. I love this one. I love sunflowers. I love birdhouses. This is just so cute. The little birds, we have little buttons on the birdhouse, your little birds up on your sunflower. So cute. Remember that all of your laser shapes are pre-fused and laser cut. Those will come with your kit. We do have kits available, so if you're seeing this and you're not in the club and you didn't join the club, that's okay. You can still get a kit. We do have some available. So head over to the website, shabbyfabrics.com, and pick up your kit. All right, so I'm going to take you through some of the basic piecing with this. Remember that in the first videos we had done, I believe it was Loveland Cottage was the first one we did. That one we did everything from start to finish. So we showed you all of the applique, we showed you binding, we showed you how to put all your blocks together, hanging sleeve. We did all of that in that video. So if I'm moving too quickly for you and you're thinking, wait a minute, I don't know how to do that step, refer back to Loveland Cottage and you'll see what we're doing. All right, so I'm gonna jump into the blocks. I'm gonna show you 3 blocks today: the sunflower block, the King's Crown variation block, and the birdhouse block. So this is my block. I'm going to show you what we're going to make before we get there so that you kind of have an idea of where we're going. This is the sunflower block. So as you can see, I have cut out my pieces. What I do when I cut these pieces out, you are definitely going to want to label them. This is such a help for getting organized with this. I used the Sunflower Slope wall hanging cutting instructions from Shabby Fabrics to get all my blocks cut out. And in here we are telling you what you're cutting and what letter it is so that you can cut your blocks and get them all labeled and ready to go. It's just meant to supplement this book. This is the book that Nancy Halverson has put out. She has graciously allowed us to do these videos to show you step by step how to do the blocks. But this book you will have to make this quilt or make any of these blocks, because I'm not going to give you measurements. They're all in this book. We've taken the measurements from here and put them into a cutting guide just for your convenience and to make it easier for you. But you will need this to put the blocks together. All right? Your templates are also in here for all of your applique. They're all in the center of your book, and you'll just remove this and then use that to do your laser cut applique when you actually build your house. All right? Okay, so let's get started with this. So here's my block. This is where we're going, and we're using a directional fabric, and this is letter B. This is the fan fabric. Letter A is not directional. Letter D is. So what we're going to do is we're going to do sew and flip. There are several methods of sew and flip. The most common is to draw a line down the center like this, draw a line, sew on the line, and then flip it back just like this, which I have done ahead of time. That's the most common method. So you would draw the line, sew on that line, take a rotary cutter, and I'm going to cut a 1/4 inch away. All right? I'm going to take an iron. I'm just going to heat that seam up a little bit, flip this open, and press. All right? You can use a little bit of steam if you want to. That'll be fine. Kind of make that corner stay where it's supposed to be. So then I come up with this. All right? First method. Second method, because now I need to put sew and flip corners with my A block onto 3 corners of this, and then I have a green one on this corner. A D square goes on the corner here. So now I need to put these on all the way around. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a D square here and do opposite corners first. Rather than trying to put this one on, then this one on, I'm going to put the opposite corners on. So let's talk about D. It's a directional fabric. So I'm making this square of this right here, this upper square right here, and I need this line I want it pointing up, just like this. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to fold it in half. That's not right. Do you see that? If I sew and flip it like that, it's going backwards. Let's turn that over. There we go. That's correct. Okay. So you can see, if I were sewing on the fold, then this is where this goes, and this now makes this right side up with this directional fabric. So I know this is the fold. See the fold I put in it? That's where I want to sew. So let's talk about how to do that, other than drawing a line. You can draw the line, corner to corner, sew on the line, and flip it. I have a different method of doing that. One of them is using the corner clipper. This is a product by Creative Grids, a folded corner clipper, and I use this product a lot. The folded corner clipper is going to cut the corner off first, then you sew it, then you flip it and press it. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to line this up on my corner exactly where I want it. I'm going to line up my folded corner clipper. I have 4 things that I'm lining up here. The top is lined up. This side is lined up. 1.5 mark is lined up perfectly. And this little mark right here is also lined up with this edge. So I have 4 confirmations. This is the proper way to cut this. I'm going to take a rotary cutter and I'm going to cut this ahead of time. Okay? I'm going to take an extra fine patchwork pin. These are also by Clover. I'm going to pin this because I know that when I go to sew this, these 2 corners, I'm going to start here. When I get down to here, these 2 corners are going to try to walk away from each other, and I want them to stay together. So that's why I'm going to put a pin right here to remind that fabric, stay put. All right, so let's go sew that. All right, so I'm going to remove the pin. Again, I'm just going to heat that seam up a little bit and press this. That looks great. Okay, so now I need to do the other 2. These are going to be done with my A squares. So now let's talk about my favorite method. That is using the Cluck Cluck Sew diagonal seam tape. I love this product. So I have this product installed on my sewing machine. This is an adhesive tape that goes onto the bed of your sewing machine and onto your table and gives you direct lines on where to line up your fabric square as you're sewing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply pin this on, just like I normally would, correct? I'm going to do the other side as well, because I already know where I want to go with this. And I'm going to stick another pin in this, just like this. So I'm going to now go to the machine and talk to you about how you do that. You don't have to draw the line, and you're not cutting it ahead of time, because sometimes cutting it ahead of time is a little scary. I get that. So I'm going to go to the machine and show you how I do this. All right, so right here, I'm going to lower my presser foot and put my needle down so I know exactly where I want to start is right there. Now I'm going to take this corner right here and I'm going to turn it, rotate this around until it exactly lines up with the red line in the center of my tape, which is on my machine. Let me show you that. So here's where I put the tape on the machine. This red line is exactly where the needle is. This line is 1/4 inch to the left of the needle. This is 1/4 inch to the right of the needle. So if I was sewing, let's say I had to draw the line and sew on either side of it, I could use these 2 lines. But I'm not doing that with this one. I want to sew directly in the center of this square, just like this. So I have the needle is lined up with the corner where I'm going to start. I have this corner is lined up with the red line, and as I'm sewing, I'm just going to slowly sew Try to move my hand so you can see that. I'm just going to slowly sew and just walk this right up and follow this right along that red line. See how that's just tracking straight along there? That's what I'm looking for. Okay, so let's check how we did. So whenever I do that and I don't actually have a line there, I'm going to take this to my iron first. Notice I did not cut that yet. I'm going to take this to my iron. I'm going to flip this back and press it. What I'm looking for is if this lines up with the edges of my block, and it does. It looks really good. Oh, it's exactly where I want it. Perfect. See how that lines up exactly where I wanted that? So now I know I can take a small ruler. I just have a Creative Grids 1.5 by 6.5 inch ruler on set with me today to do this. I'm just going to trim those 2 corners off, and now I have my block. And that goes right here. Whoop. There we go. That goes here. So I have done the rest of these ahead of time, and I want you to note that they're not all the same because this is a directional fabric. You see how this one goes down here, this one goes in this corner, and this one goes in this corner. And I have taken the time to actually make all of my directions match. Now, if you don't care about directional fabric, just sew. Just go. You're good. If you do, like me, Jen says I don't sleep at night if my directional fabric isn't right, and she's right. I will seam rip directional fabric every single time to make sure it's right. But if that doesn't bother you, don't worry about it. But if it does, this is how I do it. All right? Okay, so now I have this element of this block complete, and I'm just going to leave this right here just so you can keep your eye on it and you know where I'm at. Okay, so the next part of this block, let's take those off of here, is I actually need to sew a C rectangle to an E rectangle, all right? And that's going to be these elements right here, okay? So a C is going to go on top of an E for this one. Here, the E is on top of the C. Do you see that? That way the directional fabric makes sense, okay? So I've done some of those ahead of time. So I'm going to take my little letters off, and I'm going to sew this to the top, and I will be right back. We'll get these pressed out, and we'll get our block assembled. Okay, so I'm going to take my iron again. I'm going to press toward the green on this. So I'm just going to press toward the green on all of these. Now I'm going to get these laid back out. This is my bottom one. He fits in here. This is a side. This is a side. And this is the top. Perfect. And then I have an F square right in the center. See how that block goes together? Just like that. So putting this together, you've got this row is first, this row, and this row. Just like that. Let's look how I press this. So when I put the top row together, I pressed towards this. This one I pressed towards this. This one I pressed towards the green. That way these seam allowances right here all nested together when I put this block together. And I pressed all of this towards the center instead of pushing it back onto these points. I find pressing away from points rather than to points is going to make your block lay a lot flatter. That is the sunflower block. I'm going to clean this up and be back with the King's Crown Variation block. All right, so here we are with the King's Crown Variation block. This is a fun block to do. Again, I have some directional fabric running in your directions for your cutting. We have chosen to do a fast flying geese. Fast flying geese uses the Ultimate Flying Geese tool by Deb Heatherly. We love this tool here. And anytime I'm making flying geese units, I always use this tool. It makes perfectly accurate flying geese. I'm going to show you how to do flying geese if you don't have that tool, all right? Let me show you how to do that. So we're going to start with a rectangle, a D rectangle, and a square, all right? And I'm just going to start sew and flip on the corner, just like this. And I've done one ahead of time, exactly the same as regular sew and flip, right? I've got it sewn, I've got it trimmed, and we can go ahead and get this pressed out. You're going to sew and flip on this corner. All right, so to make the other one, now I need to sew and flip on the other corner, but I want my vines, if I'm making this top one, I want them to go up. So I'm going to play with this for a second. This way they're upside down. Let's turn it over. There it is. This way, they're right side up. I always test and look at directional fabric before I actually sew it or do anything else to it. All right, so I'm going to set this on here like this. I'm going to pin right here, and I'm going to go sew this corner to corner using the Cluck Cluck Sew diagonal seam tape. Okay, so let's check that and make sure that looks good. Yep, I'm happy with that. I can go ahead and trim this out. All right, so that's how you would make a traditional flying geese block. All right, but in your directions, we have given you, in your Shabby Fabrics, if you have our kit, you have directions, cutting instructions. We have told you that if you want to use the Ultimate Flying Geese ruler, we have actually given you the cutting directions to do that. So the first thing I'm going to pull up is the Creative Grids spinning mat. I have my Ultimate Flying Geese tool, and I've pre-cut my squares ahead of time, right here. D squares and B squares, per my instructions in the Shabby Fabrics instructions that come with your kit. That's where you're going to find that. Now, I want to show you on this tool how when you're making a finished size on flying geese, the tool actually gives you that information. I love that about this tool. That way, if you lose your instructions when you open a ruler, no fear. You have them written right on the ruler. How clever is that? So you're going to cut one of the big square, cut one, and that's my D square, my big guy. Then cut 4 of the smaller squares, and that's what I have cut here with the B, all right? So let's piece this. Let me show you how to piece this together, and then I'll show you how to trim it with the tool, all right? So we're going to start with a D square, and I'm going to take a B square, and I need to draw a line down the center, and then sew a 1/4 inch on either side. That sometimes can be a little difficult. So we use a tool called the Creative Grids Seam Guide. This is wonderful. So we take this, place it on our square, and I'm lining up, grab a friction pen. We're lining up the corner right here in the groove and right here, so I know that this thing is perfectly centered in the middle of my square. And then I'm going to draw a line on one side and on the other, just like that. Perfect. Now I can sew directly on the lines, and I don't have to worry about, am I a 1/4 inch away from a line or not? This tool is invaluable. They come in a 9-inch size and a 15-inch size if you're doing this on a much larger block. This is the 9-inch size that I have with me today, all right? There will be a link to this tool. In fact, all the notions that we have on this set will be linked below this video. So if you're looking for something specific that I'm using today, you can find it very easily by clicking on the link right below this video. Just click on more, a little drop down, and boom, all that stuff will just magically be there, okay? All right, so let's take this. So now, again, I have directional fabric here, right? Remember that, I have directional fabric. So when I put my lines on here, if you line all your squares up the same, the little threads on there, I line all my squares up, all my directions are the same. I'm going exactly the same direction with all of my pieces. Yep, that one is the same. This one and this one. So I have a bunch of these that I did ahead of time. Just so you can see, they're all done exactly the same, all right? They're all right side up. They're all going this direction. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place a square in the upper corner, and I'm going to put a pin in this here and another pin on this side, just like that. Okay, this one goes in the bottom corner. And again, I'm going to pin this here. I know that my sewing lanes are right here. So I'm intentionally keeping my pins away from my sewing lines. I don't want to have to mess with these pins. I just want to be able to sew, right? I don't want to stop and remove a pin. So I place them away from my sewing lane. All right. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is, you see where these are overlapping right here? There's a good bit of overlap here. I'm going to take my little sharp scissors. I'm going to hold this point. I'm going to come right here where they intersect, and I'm just going to clip this out of here. This is going to reduce the bulk in my seam allowance of my flying geese, all right, in the finished one. So I'm just going to cut those corners away. You can see my lines intersect perfectly right there, okay? So we take this to the machine and sew right on the lines. And I have done that ahead of time, just like that. There's my sewing, all right? Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this apart down the middle. So again, I've got a Creative Grids 1.5 by 6.5, and I'm using this side that has the 1/4 inch marked with a dashed line. I'm going to place that right on my stitches, and I'm going to cut just like that. Okay? Let's take out the pins. And let's go take this to the iron and press this out. So I'm going to heat my seam up, and I'm just going to flip these over just like this. A little bit of steam is fine here. Let's go ahead and do this other one. There we go. All right. All right, now I'm going to put one more of these on here like this and sew on the lines. However, remember I have directional fabric here. When I turn this like this, and I can see this is my flying geese. So I have vines running this way, vines running this way. That makes me crazy. So I have my lines drawn like this. I'm going to reverse my lines. I'm going to put this on here like this. You see how now they're running the same direction, but they're not quite right. Let's turn it again. There it is right there. That is where I want that. Now these vines all run this way. Let's test this one, right? Because this one they're running, look at that, it's perfect. Now they're both running that direction. So I need to take this line off of here and redraw it. So I'm going to take it to the iron. I'm going to take this line off, and I'm going to redraw it. Now that I know exactly where I want this, and I'm not moving this square around a lot. I just picked it up, put it down, and you know what? I'm not even going to turn my board around because I I know I'm going to get confused on which way this goes. Let's just do it like that. I haven't touched it. Put it back on here. And look. Yes, it's still exactly where I want it. I know if one is right, so is the other. So I'm going to pin this on. Just like this. And sew that. Now let me go ahead and do the second one the same way. Let's pin this on both sides. All right, I'm going to go sew these and I'll be right back. All right, so I've got these stitched. I'm going to go ahead and cut these just like before, and then I'm going to show you how to trim this up with our Ultimate Flying Geese tool. All right, so I have all my little flying geese are ready to go. They're ready to get trimmed up, and in our directions in the cutting guide, we do tell you to use letter C. Letter C in your trim tool is right here. This is letter C. So I'm at trim 1, letter C. I'm going to line these up. That is perfect. So you can see how this dashed line up perfectly with the flying geese, and you can see where I'm going to trim, right? I'm trimming here. I'm going to rotate my mat and trim 2 right there, okay? I'm going to rotate it one more time. I'm now going to drop my ruler down. Again, I'm looking for letter C, trim 2, letter C. And now I'm going to line this up exactly on my flying geese, just like that. See, the footprint of it is right here. The dashed lines are perfectly where I just cut. Here is the C in the center, and it's telling me I'm doing a 1.5 by 3, and that's exactly what I want. I'm going to trim, spin my mat, and trim again, just like that. Now I should mention that these are finished sizes. So if you're looking in a pattern, let's say you're using this tool and you're looking in a pattern and it says you're making a 2.5 by 4.5 inch flying geese, you want to do a 2 by 4 on this ruler because this is a finished size. So you have to take the seam allowance off of that. We get a lot of questions regarding that with this tool. It's probably my most frequently asked question is I don't have in here a 2.5 by 4.5. That's because this is a finished size. And so that is a 2 by 4 is what you would be cutting if that's what your pattern is requiring. All right, remember to take your seam allowances off of there. Okay, so I have this trimmed up, beautiful. And now let's lay this out. This is the bottom one right here. See this bottom one right here? That's where that goes, right there. Okay, so I'm going to go through. I'm going to trim the rest of these up and get them laid out, and then we'll go on to the half square triangles. All right, so I have block A. I have already got that squared up. Now I used a 3.5 inch ruler, 3.5 inch creative grids, just like that, and Fussy Cut. I thought I would use the sunflowers today. I like the sunflowers. That's the center of our block. That is block A. All right, so let's take a look. I have got all of my flying geese trimmed out. This one is here. This one is at the top. And here. And here. Beautiful. This is great. Okay, now let's talk about doing half square triangles. So Nancy does this a little bit different than you normally would. Normally when you do a half square triangle, you're going to draw a line down the center, sew a 1/4 inch on either side, cut it in half. That's typical for making a half square triangle. Nancy does it a little bit different, and I really like the way she does this. So she takes a C and a B block, like this, and she's going to put them on top of each other. So far it's normal, right? We're going to draw the line, sew on the line, but then we're cutting a 1/4 inch away. So instead of drawing a line and sewing a 1/4 inch on either side, we're actually sewing on the line and cutting a 1/4 inch away. Okay, great. So I've done a few of these ahead of time because, again, I have directional fabric. If this is where you want to go with this, this is how I did this. I put this on here and I figured out which corner I was going to work on at a time. I have this laid out on my sewing table, so I know I'm going to work on this corner right here, and I want this to look just like that. So I took my friction pen and I drew an X where I'm cutting this off, right? I'm going to cut this off, and then I know this flips down and this direction of those vines is correct right here. This one, I have my X there. This is my upper corner. This is my lower corner. Okay, so here's how I did that. I'm looking for the vine. I want the vine to go up, so I'm going to fold it in half, corner to corner. This is how I want that vine to look. So I'm going to place it on the square, just like this. That's what I want my half square triangle to look like. So I'm going to cut this side of it off, right? This is the only way I could figure to do it because I was getting confused on where I was. And so I said, okay, I have to know which side I'm cutting because I'm just going to sew corner to corner using the Cluck Cluck sew tape. I'm not actually drawing the line. So I have to know where am I cutting, and this is how I kept track of that. Okay, so I'm going to go sew this corner to corner, and then I'm going to get these all trimmed out and pressed, and we have a block. Here we go. Okay, so just like I said, I have marked my corner, sewed down the center. When I flip this up, this is exactly what I want that to look like. See that? Beautiful. So I know that I can go ahead and press these. No, you know what? Let's cut this first. Let's cut this first. That way I know for a fact I'm cutting the right side off because I just thought if I press this, there's a friction pen there. I'm going to erase my X. Then I'm not sure if I'm doing that right. So let's just go through and cut these all off now. Make sure we cut the X, marks the corner I'm cutting. There we go. I can verify I've cut 4 X's off. That's exactly what I wanted to do. All right, let's go ahead and get these pressed. Get them back into the block. And I'm going to flip my block over and show you how I assembled this. You can see my seam allowances. Beautiful. Okay. This one is here. This one is here. So your blue is going towards the center. This one is here, and this one is here. There we go. That is exactly how I would do that block. All right. So let's take a look on the back how I did that. So a lot of times when I'm sewing points, I open my seams because it flattens those seams right out. So when I put this row together and this row together, I opened those seam allowances. Now this one I didn't see a need to, so I just pressed toward the A block. You're still able to nest these seams together, even though this one is pressed this way and this one is pressed open. You have half of this seam to nest together. And then I press the entire thing complete open when I finish that. All right, you can see how I did that. And there's my finished block. All right, that is the King's Crown variation block. All right, I'm back. I'm going to show you the Birdhouse block. This is so cute. I love this. I think last month we did the little birds in the nest and the mama bird. It was so cute. Well, here's the birdhouse. I love how they all go together. All right, so here we have a birdhouse. Very cute. This one's in the upper corner. You're going to make 4 of those if you're doing the wall hanging. So I'm going to show you the elements to this. So first of all, we're going to do the roof. So I have an A squares and D squares and a D rectangle. And we're going to do sew and flip. Hey, we've already done that, right? Okay. So I'm going to put my square on here. I'm going to flip it. I'm going to make sure, yep, that is exactly what I want because directional fabric again, right? Okay, I've done this ahead of time for you. I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me do it again, right? So I've already got these sewn. I use the Cluck Cluck sew tape, just like that. So I'm just going to trim this out, press it, and set it to the top. Give it a little press here, just like that. All right, here's my roof. Perfect. All right, the next thing we're going to do is the birdhouse. Okay, let's do the center. So again, all I'm doing is sew and flip all the way around a black square. You see that? There's my black square. Sew and flip all the way around. I did that exactly the same as what I've already done. So I can just go through. See how I did opposite corners, right? I talked to you about that before on the first block. We did opposite corners. I did exactly the same thing here. And again, I'm just going to flip this over and flip this one over. We're good to go. And give that a little steam so it'll stay where I want it to. Okay, that is the center. Now, the rest of this is very simple. Let me grab all my pieces here. All we're going to do is we're going to lay an F piece above it. We're going to put a G piece below it. I have E rectangles on either side, and I have B rectangles on either side of that, just like that. How do I put this together? You're going to put these two together here, add this, and add this. And you are pressing toward the rectangles that you are just adding. So you're not going to press down into these points. See how I pressed away from my points here? I thought that was important to show you how I pressed the back of this block, all right? I pressed away from my points, all right? Then I did the bottom. Let's grab that one. I have a couple of C rectangles and a J. That's my little post for my birdhouse, just like that. I press towards J. You could also press towards C. I don't think it matters how you press here. I just press toward the darker fabric. That's just natural to me. So I did press like that. When I put the roof on this, I did press this open. There were a lot of seams going on here, and I do have points on these corners. So I wanted to make sure that those points opened so that I had a nice, good point to catch when I assemble these blocks together. And I know how it goes when you're making a wall hanging like this. You might sit down and do all of your sunflower blocks, and then you're doing all of your king's crown blocks, or then you're doing all of your birdhouse blocks. Well, sometimes it takes me a month to put something like this together because we're busy, we're working, we're not doing this all at the same time. So I love the project bags that we did for this. This is the June Taylor Quilt As You Go project bags. I love these. You just set your finished blocks inside, and then you know exactly where they are. It keeps everything together. You could also put a lot of your smaller tools in here if you're afraid you're going to misplace these in your sewing room, or if you have children helping you. Take all your small tools, stick them in your project bag. This is a perfect place to keep all of your items together so that you don't lose them. So when you go to create your finished block, you've got everything already done. So we do still have kits available on the June Taylor Quilt As You Go project bags in Wander Lane to coordinate with the whole thing. let me talk about the embroidery with this. Now the embroidery in the center, we're doing a back stitch and a French knot. Those stitches we've already demonstrated, but I did want to show you a couple of fun things that I've found that help make this easier. So I have the Richard Hemming size 4 embroidery needle and your floss that you've got. I've got a Clover embroidery needle threader. This is wonderful for threading your floss if you need to use that. I use Thread Magic to tame that floss. Sometimes it's just fly away. If the environment is dry, there's a lot of static in the air. And that Thread Magic, boy, that will just make that floss just behave itself. The other thing I have are the Nailed It open thimbles. I love these thimbles. These are by the Gypsy Quilter. These are incredible. When you're trying to sew through fusible web, sometimes that gets really heavy and it's hard to push a needle through that. These thimbles come in 2 sizes. So if you're wondering, am I a medium or a large? It doesn't matter. You get both sizes in one package. These go right onto my finger, just like this, and you have a perfect thimble for pushing that needle through that fusible. These work amazing. So you don't have to wonder what size my finger is. You get both sizes. I have the Carrera thread set. We're just using the Aurifil basic neutral colors. You've got black, white, and a gray in there. It's perfect for putting this together. The Wonder Clips and needles. We're using top stitch needles and the super non-stick needles. I have 2 sets of needles on here. Why is that? Well, the top stitch needles I'm using a lot just to put this thing together. The super non-stick needles, if you're doing the applique by machine using our thread set here, you're going to want a non-stick needle. It's going to go right through that fusible and your needles don't get all gummed up. That's really a nice feature to that needle. I have some tweezers on here. Some of these pieces are small, and when you're placing your laser shapes, I did use these little tweezers quite often. A seam ripper. We almost used that today, but not quite. Of course, my pins, a fresh blade in your rotary cutter, a seam guide if you have a problem with a 1/4 inch seam. Definitely pick up that seam guide setter and the refill packs for the seam guides. They're invaluable for marking a 1/4 inch on your machine, and then your 1/4 inch will be dead on every time. Of course, the diagonal seam tape, that is king here. I use that a lot. A wool pressing mat helps you get your seams flat. I have an Applifuse mat and a wafer 2 light box also on set with me is what we used. So if you have a friend that says, boy, I wish I could make one of those, they can. Just send them to the website and they can pick up their kit and you can make it together. I hope you picked up some good tips on how to deal with directional fabric. Don't be afraid of it. It's fun to use. Make sure to test it. Always, always, always test it before you sew it and definitely before you cut it. That way you won't ever miscut. I will see you next time on a Shabby Fabrics tutorial.